On October 17th, 2017, EA shut down Visceral Games, or what they used to be known as Redwood Shores. They were working on a single-player Star Wars game, and on that team was Amy Hennig, the brilliant brain behind my favorite video game franchise of all time, Uncharted. Everything we heard about from the project was basically going to be Uncharted and Star Wars. I mean, sign me the f*** up, am I right? Back when Disney bought Star Wars from George Lucas, they shut down LucasArts. At the time, they were currently working on a game called Star Wars 1313. That game was shown off at E3 and everyone under the sun was freaking pumped. I mean, just take a look at this. Our main character was supposed to be Boba Fett before he donned the helmet and suit. I mean, this was going to be Uncharted, but in Star Wars. But my heart broke whenever we found out it was canceled. It got back together whenever Disney contracted EA to do Star Wars games. We heard that they were bringing back Star Wars 1313 in some way or another. But then my heart broke again when they shut down this project. Again. Seriously, I was devastated. This looked like the perfect game for me. I know I'm giving a lot of backstory right now, but I just wanted to inform the people who may not have known about this at all. So yeah, I'm a little emotional about it. Visceral Games made their name whenever they created the beloved Dead Space franchise. So since they are unfortunately closed down, I wanted to highlight their top 10 best games. So let's pour one out for them.
What are you doing?
Nothing.
Don't do that!
Why not?
Don't do that!
Why not?
Chad,
it's fine.
No, stop!
It's fine.
Stop it!
Connor likes it!
No, stop it!
Okay, fine.
Don't. Chad.
Number 10. Road Rash Jailbreak was the last in the popular combat racing game series. I never really got into the other games, but Jailbreak was the one I enjoyed the most. There are several different charismatic characters you can choose from. Gameplay is a little stiff at times, but you get used to it after a while. Combat is fun. When riding up against another racer, you can kick or punch them off their vehicle. Buttons are mapped to the L1, L2, R1, and R2. If you want to hit an enemy on the right, use the right triggers, and the left with the left. The only problem I have with this Road Rash game is that if you get knocked off your bike, it takes so long to get back on that it's basically pointless to continue with the race. It has its problems, but it's still a fun combat racing game on the PS1. Number 9. The Battlefield franchise is huge for EA, but Battlefield Hardline was different. All the other Battlefield games are military focused, but in Hardline, you take control of a Miami detective named Nick Mendoza. The game is still from a first-person perspective, but since it's in such a different setting, I would have loved to see a third-person cover shooter or something. It was already a really cool spin-off, but to change the perspectives would be even cooler. Anyway, our main character Nick Mendoza is out to bust a huge drug cartel. Battlefield Hardline introduces several new things. Really good driving segments, having the options to stealth your way through levels, arresting enemies, and much more. There's not many games where you take control of a police officer, so this is a good change of pace. Plus, I love that EA took the risk of doing a spin-off like this. Number 8. Over the years, Dante's Inferno has become sort of a cult classic. It's based on the book of the same name. Anyone who's played this game can tell you that the gameplay is basically a ripoff of the God of War series. I feel bad saying that because people worked really hard on this game and don't want it to be described as a ripoff, but it's just the way some people talk about it. The story revolves around a crusader named Dante. His wife was taken to hell by Satan himself, and now you must fight through all the circles of hell to save your wife, Beatrice. Gameplay is fast-paced and over the top. You'll fight tons of hellish creatures as you make your way through the game. Boss battles are probably some of my favorite parts. They incorporate quick-time events in some parts of the game. That's not a bad thing. It fits the game really well. The art and level design couldn't be more spot on. It's all bone and gore for the 7-ish hours it is to finish the game. This cult classic is a great action adventure that's well worth checking out. Number 7. Dead Space Extraction really surprised fans of the franchise upon its release. It released exclusively for the Nintendo Wii, but then later on made its way to the PlayStation 3. Dead Space Extraction is a prequel to the original Dead Space. It shows how the infestation of the necromorphs came to be. The rail shooter isn't a popular genre outside of the arcade, so for Visceral Games to take the risk of developing a horror rail shooter to consoles is quite bold. Lucky for them, their risk paid off. It was beloved by many fans and is one of the most underrated games on the Wii. It plays like a normal rail shooter. You need to cut off the limbs of the infected creatures known as necromorphs to kill them. You can use the Wiimote as normal, or if you're a true gamer, you can kill the f*** out of these necromorphs with a Wii Zapper. Twist the Wiimote to the side to activate your weapon's secondary mode. You could also swing the nunchuck or shake the zapper to perform a melee attack or push these monsters off of you. The level design and story are great, along with the satisfaction of cutting off these necromorphs' limbs. Dead Space Extraction brings a breath of fresh air to the vastly overlooked Nintendo Wii, and we appreciate it. Number 6.
I've talked several times about how I really do not like turn-based games other than Pokemon. But every time I talk about it, I always seem to forget about one game. Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. I really liked the Lord of the Rings movies when they came out. Their games were freaking awesome too. Other than that trash Fellowship to the Ring game. We forget about that.
Now, there's obviously not a movie called The Third Age, but this game involved characters and scenes of the movie, but from different characters' perspectives. Basically the same sections and areas, but with the select amount of characters that the movies didn't shine on.
I played a lot of this game back in the day. I don't only like this because it's Lord of the Rings, but I liked it because it plays the genre the way I want it to.
The game moves fast and doesn't drown you in dialogue or menus. There are upgrades and gear to equip each character with, but it's not overwhelming and easy to find your way through. The story and characters are great and keep you playing because you want to see what happens next, and if you'll run into any other familiar faces from the hit films.
Lord of the Rings: The Third Age is a criminally underrated game. Even if you're like me and you don't like turn-based RPGs, you should still check this out. When I went to capture footage for this game, I only wanted to capture around an hour, but I ended up getting carried away and playing for like 2.5 hours. That shows a sign of a great game.
Number 5. 007 Everything or Nothing is one of the most underrated 007 games I have ever played. Even though this stars Pierce Brosnan, it's surprisingly not based on one of his movies. He is by far the best Bond, fight me in the comments. Everything or Nothing is split into 2 types of missions. The majority of the game are third-person action cover shooter missions. The gunplay feels fantastic. Switching between all sorts of different weapons on the go makes the game move at a fast pace. You can fight baddies in hand-to-hand combat with great final takedowns, and also stealth sections that give you that true spy feeling. The other types of missions are vehicle segments that are fast and intense. The vehicle parts are a blast to play, but the only problem I have with them, and the game as a whole, is that in these sections there are so many random stop points or sharp turns that you can't pull off unless you know it's there. So that means that sometimes it's trial and error. With the over-the-top action, gadgets, and babes, 007 Everything or Nothing is a James Bond game that you should not look over. It's not only one of the best games developed by Visceral Games, but also one of the best James Bond games of all time. Number 4. Horror is a niche genre. They don't necessarily make bank or break into the mainstream. There's a huge lack of quality horror games in the PlayStation 3 and 360 generation. Dead Space 2 is one of the few quality ones. Isaac Clarke, the main protagonist from the first game, is dealing with PTSD from what happened 3 years ago from the events of the first game. PTSD isn't highlighted upon in many games, so to see it in a true horror game is amazing. Dead Space 2 is one of, if not the first horror game I've played that had multiplayer in it. I only played the single player, but from what I heard, the multiplayer is actually surprisingly good. This game is a little bit more action than the first entry, but it's still a terrifying experience. Dead Space 2 is a fantastic horror game that is a must-play still to this day. Number 3.
You know a game is good when it's talked about as one of the best movie tie-in games of all time. And that's praise because we know how awful some of the movie tie-in games are. We've all experienced it one way or another.
The game follows the movie almost beat for beat, which is great if you love the movie like me. The gameplay is virtually the same as Two Towers, which isn't bad at all. The gameplay in both games are tuned just right. In each mission, you get to choose different characters. In certain ones, you have the selection to choose between characters who play quite differently. Gimli is the heaviest, Legolas is fast, and Aragorn is the perfect mix between the both. which is a bummer on my end because Legolas is my boy, but no matter how much you upgrade him in the fantastic upgrade system, he still isn't as well balanced as Aragorn. Other missions you can play as Gandalf, who's OP, and in others you get to choose between Frodo or Sam. Giving the player the ability to have the option to play as their favorite character, along with being able to play couch co-op with a buddy, gives Return of the King some serious replayability, and endless fun with a friend. Even if you don't like Lord of the Rings, this is still a blast to play. Not only is Return of the King one of the best movie tie-in games of all time, but one of Visceral's best games of all time. Number 2.
Ever since I reviewed this game, I have come to love it more and more. I think I even said in my video about this that this game has no right to be as good as it is. I mean, a movie tie-in game from a movie in the 60s released in 2005? What? It's a risk that EA of all people, were willing to take.
I mentioned earlier that I already made a review on this game. I don't want to reiterate all the things I said in that video, but ever since I played this for my video, I've replayed it several times after. I 100%ed the crap out of it just for fun, because that's what the game is, fun. It has flawless combat, level design, voice acting, and just much, much more.
Hey Allie,
What?
I'm leaving you and I'm taking the dog with me.
What did you just say?
Nothing.
Number 1. Dead Space is the scariest game of all time. What do I have to say that hasn't already been said? You control a systems engineer named Isaac Clarke. Him and his team show up to the USG Ishimura after it sends out a distress call. Once they show up, they find out that the whole ship has been infected and slaughtered by these creatures called necromorphs. They travel through the vents of the ship, and the only way to kill them is to cut off each of their limbs. Every corner you walk around, or every door you open, this is you. No lie, because they can come at you so fast and so unexpectedly. Jump scares are cheap in horror games and movies nowadays, but when done right, it works well. They can be used effectively if you create good tension, tone, level design, and frightening monsters. Some overdo it, but not this game. There is not one moment when you feel safe. It is so incredibly tense and frightening from front to back.
It reinvigorated the horror genre in a whole new way. Dead Space is not only the scariest game of all time, but it's Visceral's best game of all time. I wanted to make this video a lot closer after EA actually shut down Visceral Games, but the video wasn't coming the way I wanted it to, so I decided to put it on the back burner until I was comfortable with it, which is now. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. Be sure to stay tuned till the very end so you can see some more top 10s that I've done. I'll round this video out with one question. What is your favorite game from this sadly shut down studio? Leave them in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at TeslaChad. As always, thanks for watching.